But I thought this morning it's so important for many different people that we connected to also just to have a different perspective on what's going on. And it's always so helpful to have a different voice, and a voice like yours where you're coaching and you're guiding people and helping people in that way in very practical ways also. Now that people are facing all kinds of challenges, and kind of a lot of people seem to be taken by surprise or seem to be a bit overwhelmed by the sudden change and the sudden shift.
So I think the first thing for us to recognize is that, and we cleverly try and avoid it as human beings as we grow up, is realize that all of the seasons of life will come. All of the seasons will come. And we'll see all of the seasons probably many, many times. But the durations and the intensity of those seasons does vary hugely. So I think the first thing that, for me personally, I realized that that's the nature of life. You know, my mother is somebody who went through all sorts of challenge and adversity, and my life has been easy by a doddle, you know. So I grew up recognizing that life had its ups and downs and challenges personally, professionally, in all sorts of different ways. And so for me personally, it's about realizing that every day is a bonus and it's a blessing. It's exactly that. It's a bonus, it's a blessing. And there's something that's so important about seeing that. And often we get so caught up in the to-do, the goals, the dreams, and the aspirations, which are beautiful things, that we forget that. Difficult times like this, as tough as they are, they remind us of the beauty and the preciousness and the fragility of this thing called life. None of us know how much time we have on the clock. And so whilst this is incredibly tough, incredibly taxing, incredibly turbulent, many people are reconnecting to themselves, they're reconnecting to their heart, they're reconnecting to their dear ones, wherever they might well be in the world. And there's beauty in that. There's pain also, but there's deep, deep, deep beauty in that. So that's the first thing that I would say. And that's been my realization. That's been my realization. So yeah, that's the first thing I would say.
What kind of advice could you give anybody who is a leader or a creative or a healer and all of those kind of invisible people who are working in the background? What kind of advice could you give anybody to stay resilient and also to stay, I guess, positive and enthusiastic about what they can do? Because I'm sure, as we all see with so many of these really frontline, you know, and they're using this word frontline, like they're at war on a level, you know, and I think many people have been called on to be able to provide some support. But how, when they are naturally givers, how can they stay resilient or charged themselves?
Yeah, I think this is such an important question. I think for all of us, you know, it's important that we start with the very, very simple little things. Rest, sleep. Sleep is so important, to try our best to sleep, to try and get the rest, because everything really is energy. So everything starts off with our energy, being mindful of our energy, trying to foster a quiet mind, trying to make sure that we get the rest and the sleep that we need to make sure that we've got the energy. Lots of people who are carers, caregivers, supporters, enablers and supporters of other people are often so selfless that they often they often put themselves last, because that's the nature of their heart. But I think for all of us, any of us, it starts off with being mindful of that space, that inner space, that head space, trying to have some very simple things in your own practice, whatever it might well be: stillness, silence, meditation, prayer, quietness. If you're lucky enough to be able to go outside, even if it's just if you're lucky enough to have a garden or just in front of your house or whatever, if you're able to walk, to do that, exercise is really important, even which we can do anywhere, that kind of movement, keeping the body movement. We're really wanting to try and do things that we can that will nourish mind, body, and spirit. The spirit bit might just be that gratitude thing that I started off with, for oneself, for one's life, for life itself, for our loved ones' lives, and wishing everybody well. That will fill us up, rather than us feeling depleted to start off with. It's really important that we feel as though we start on with a full tank. So trying to get that sleep, trying to get that rest, starting to wake up instead of waking up alarmed, to be grateful and to be here and just to take a moment and just to be still, just taking sometimes just one moment to breathe, to resettle. And then there is all sorts of things: yoga, meditation, mindfulness, music, art, what have you. So many people might be rediscovering those things. I think it's very I think the challenge is for those people who are incredibly busy right now or might be working really long hours and really long shifts. Please, please, my tip would be make sure you're reaching out and that you've got support. I've been seeing wonderful stories and reports in the media about people working, for example, in hospitals in America and here, and people saying how they're all each other's support group. There's things about people spontaneously singing, the things that we sing where people are clapping and tapping and so on, giving each other energy, sharing energy, being mindful, watching out for each other. If you're that individual, check on your own health and well-being. Make sure you've got the support you need. Don't be afraid to ask other people for help, because we will all get to that particular point. I think that's really, 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 really important. Fortunately, there'll be some people who are trained for scenarios like this. I mean, at times like this, we realize that people in, for example, the police services and the armed services that often get a tough time. And most of those people too are people who want to save and support, who wants any kind of war or conflict. Very, 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 very rarely do we want that. So I think many people are fortunate from that space, but I think it's time where we all to look out for each other and all to be supportive, doing whatever we can, when we can, what little bit we can. And I think the thing that I want to add to that is we all have different strengths. Some people are incredible that they can be there, they can care, they can tend, they can do that. Some of us, it's far more of the psychological support. I find things like that far more, whatever it is, or creative, whatever it is that what little bit we can do, or practical, food, whatever it is that we're able to do to also support each other is incredibly important right now. But being very mindful of where you are day by day and managing your energy and knowing when you need to pause and break. And for those people who are leaders, picking up on your point on leaders, this is going to be a special test for us. This tests us even more. And one of the things for us all to be aware of, that many leaders may well be stretched, may well struggle, because, for example, where we find ourselves right now at this particular moment might be something that very few leaders have seen. So many of them will struggle. So again, them having good counsel, taking care of themselves and their well-being, being mindful, heartful. This is a time not just for head, heart is required. This is a time of heart. Heart is required. The head alone can't do this work.
How do you feel for yourself personally that quiet time, meditation, reflection helps you in your own personal journey?
Well, for me, I think it's incredibly important, because I have one of those roles where I've had, my job requires that I have to have energy for people. When I'm working with somebody one-to-one, or if I'm working with a group, I've got to have energy, however it is that I feel. So I've got to be able to somehow perform regardless of what my energy is like. I mean, it must be an interesting thing for athletes sometimes, where athletes, let's say there are times where they're unwell and a tournament happens to fall when they're unwell. Somehow they've got to perform, and it must be very, very tough for them where they know that they're not at their best. So, so for me, I'm lucky that usually I have very good energy at the moment. Right now with this, I'm mindful that my energy has its ebbs and flows, but I'm also very mindful that I'm lucky that maybe the practice that I do of being still and calm gives me a high level of what I would call that energetic spiritual energy. So even when my physical body isn't feeling great, I'm feeling energetically buoyant and nourished. So it's so important that the relationship that we have with life is one where we embrace it. So my relationship, for me, the answer to the question is that my relationship with life itself is a very, very rich one. I'm very fortunate. It's been very, very kind to me. So for me, my job is to show up and to do what I can, but to be mindful on that very that micro level of this physiological system, to be mindful of it. And very, very simple things for me. Again, it's the sleep. It is the rest, the quiet time, the trusting the instinct, going with my instinct a lot. I am lucky that I like to live quite a simple life. And I think that's a really important thing. I think it does help, that simplicity. And not perspective is so important here. That helps me, that helps me. And I've got really good people, and those are my very, very simple things. The space, the silence, and my meditation is very much a lived meditation. So for example, at the moment I'm fortunate where I am, I can go out once a day and do exercise. I'll go out and for example, I'll do a combination between running and walking. And when I'm walking, I'm doing a kind of meditation wishing people well meditation, and so for me it's trying to make life itself a meditation is really, really important.
Beautiful.
And knowing the times, and also knowing the times when you're not going to feel anything like that, knowing the times when you're just feeling, oh my goodness, this person's just irritated me, oh my goodness, why am I getting that email, why is that person, recognizing that's also part of the dance. And trying to, because it took me ages to realize, here's the thing, early on in the days of me being on this kind of journey, I guess, of inner peace, which for me has really been going on for 20 years now, after a couple of years, thought, oh, but once people have found whatever they need, meditation, silence, whatever, but surely then it's done. Surely they don't need to keep practicing it. I thought once it was a one done thing deal, but I realized it's like I see it like these things in life. It's like the dust on the window. The window will always need to be dusted down. And there's that keeps us humble and connected, and to be kind, to be compassionate. That's the journey I'm on. My practice is one of trying to be as kind and compassionate, hence the heart, as I can. That's the thing that keeps me in a very, very good place.
I think that's such a wonderful point, is that the kind of maintenance that we continuously need to do that, and that utter humility and acceptance with that. So I think
big time. And can I add with that sometimes, and I think it's interesting with this too, and it's such a beautiful point, know how you work, know how all of this stuff plays out in your own system. So you're going to get those people who, for them, and Justin, I know you're probably, you're far more of an expert in this than I, that whereby almost like the physical is the way in. The yoga, that kind of practice, something physical practice is something that's good for their mind, their body. They're that kind of energetic person. It helps them to, that they all kind of need to intertwine in that way. Some people, perhaps if they're a person who has a busier mind, art, craft, blended into other kind of things that quieten their mind might well be their own thing. I'm a kind of person where it's very much an active thing. And for me, it's also finding all the things that irritate you are a meditation. All the times, all those conversations that irritate, it's great learning. It's a wonderful learning. What's my learning here? I have a saying that where there's hurting, where's the learning? Where there's hurting, that person who's annoying me, that thing that was irritating me, what's the learning? What's my learning here? So to try and see that way, and to find out what works for you. It might be for you, your meditation is your painting, is your cooking, and being still and kind and loving in that. I bet you for many people it is. So I think we can be a little bit, it's important for us to not be too, oh, I've got to be like this person or that person, how they find their way, their own practice. It will play itself out differently, but it's important to, and the beauty of times like this, it is an invitation, as tough it is, to get to know yourself and to get to embrace yourself.
Absolutely.
And I guess just one other thing to add to that is, not only do you need to always keep doing it, like cleaning the window or brushing the teeth, but regardless of your level of skill, so even if you're proficient at it, you still need to do it. And I think that's something that again can be easily, like, can be a kind of a trap. When the ego gets used to something, then it subverts the practice itself into ego, instead of into sublimating the ego into compassion, so
it's a powerful point what you're saying there. I think what you're saying here is a very powerful point. I think that those things, all those things that come in and just jolt us or whatever, invariably they're their invitation. Every disappointment is an invitation to have, disappointment for me is the cloakroom of the ego. So even if we got to a high level, that all those disappointments or things that haven't gone well or whatever, or even if we think we've done that, or, for me, all the times that nobody likes a post, it's great. Because one person's watched a video that I've posted that I thought would be useful for everybody. It's great. Because the thing is, there's something here about just showing up for me, there's something, it's partly that point, but it's partly maybe a different point. Our job is to sing our song. Our job is to show up and sing our song. It's not to sing and show up and sing our song if people are applauding. No. My job is to show up. It's to do what I do. For me personally, also, there's something about that the work is the thing that also hones the craft, is an invitation always to be kind and compassionate. And so I'm lucky that I do something that also is constantly giving me that opportunity to hone what I'm doing, probably like the singer who's constantly, the voice is constantly being warmed up by the fact that they're singing. And I think there's also an invitation here for whoever we are to find out, what are the things that am I doing what I love for a living? That's one thing. And if I'm doing what I'm doing for a living, am I doing that I'm doing for a living with love? They're two different things. Sure, I might be doing what I love for a living, but am I doing it in a way which is so loving, in a way which is very nourishing and kind? Because otherwise we can be caught up in this kind of ego trap. But if I'm not, and during this period of time where lots of things are in shift, there's an opportunity to perhaps to reconnect to lots of those things which are real passions. Mm-hmm. So those things also might have a way of kind of blending our mind, spirit, our gifts, our talents in a way whereby they're all, they're more in flow, because sometimes lots of those things can be stilted through life. There can be all sorts of things that are stopping us, and those things can also play out or be stuck in the psyche, in the system, in all sorts of different ways. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity to reconnect to lots of those things. You know, I'd love to know all those people who haven't painted since they were a child, who think, oh, let me get out the sketchbook or drawn or sketch. Those people who, I've coached so many people who are incredibly talented, incredibly gifted, and often they've got noisy minds. But I know that they've got a keyboard at home or something, they've not played it. The mental health element here is really important. These things are really important. Reconnect to those things that nourish you, that calm your mind, that sing your soul, and all of those kind of things is very, very important here also. But as leaders right now, for leaders, it's important. Leaders must step up. It's leadership. People talk about winning hearts and minds all the time, but the heart can't be won by a mind. Only the heart can do that. I have a saying that compassion is even more powerful than courage. Sure, with courage you can conquer the world, but only with compassion can you heal it. Now is the time of the heart. Now is the time of the heart.